Hello everyone and welcome to Creature Archives. This is Survive, Adapt, Evolve, the series where we explore how creatures from both real life and fantasy might fare in entirely different worlds. Today we're taking the iconic fish-hunting dinosaur Baryonyx out of early Cretaceous Europe and dropping it into one of the most chaotic modern ecosystems on the planet. A landscape reshaped by human influence and overflowing with species from every corner of the globe. The Florida Everglades. To determine how well it would do, we'll evaluate the Baryonyx across 4 key categories: habitat adaptability, dietary compatibility, competition and predation, and reproductive success. Each will be rated out of 10, leading to a final survival score. And be sure to stick around after that, because we'll also explore how Baryonyx might further evolve over time to truly become a master of the river of grass. So, could this Cretaceous semi-aquatic hunter carve out a niche in a modern ecosystem overrun with invasive species? Or would the modern world prove too alien for it to adapt? Let's find out on this episode of Creature Archives. Before we go any further, there are a few important things we need to clear up. First, the Everglades, at least the version we know today, is actually very young. The modern ecosystem is only about 5,000 years old, and human activity has reshaped it dramatically, with invasive species now playing major roles in how the entire system functions. For this analysis, we're treating the Everglades as it exists right now, invasives and all. Think of it as bottling the ecosystem exactly as it is today, and then dropping a breeding population of Baryonyx into it and giving them the time they need to adapt and evolve within this relatively young environment. We also need to address the human factor. If a population of Baryonyx suddenly appeared in the Everglades, people reacting with confusion would be an understatement. There would be questions, panic, and most importantly, the people with guns. And as cool and deadly as Baryonyx are, they're simply no match for the power of the Second Amendment. So, to give the species a fair chance, we'll be assuming humans treat them no differently than they treat native wildlife like alligators. Baryonyx lived in warm, humid, river-dominated floodplains during the early Cretaceous, particularly in what is now southern England and the Iberian Peninsula. Its fossils are consistently found in sediments that represent ancient waterways like slow-moving rivers, shallow lakes, swampy deltas, and coastal wetlands that flooded throughout the year. Its long crocodile-like snout, conical fish-grabbing teeth, powerful forelimbs, and likely semi-aquatic lifestyle all point to an animal perfectly at home wading, swimming, and navigating dense marshy terrain. Now let's compare its home to the modern Florida Everglades, one of the largest freshwater wetlands on Earth. The Everglades are a sprawling mosaic of sawgrass prairies, mangrove forest, tree islands, cypress swamps, and endless slow, shallow channels. Warm temperatures, intense humidity, and a near-constant sheet flow of water define the region. Even the seasonal drought period, when the landscape contracts and water levels drop dramatically, still leave behind deep pools and channels that semi-aquatic animals rely on. So, from a broad ecological perspective, the Everglades is an excellent match for a creature like Baryonyx. The shallow waterways, mudflats, and humid subtropical climate line up closely with the environments it evolved in. There are, however, a few challenges preventing this from being a perfect fit. Dense sawgrass marshes can act like natural barbed wire, slowing and cutting even modern wildlife. Baryonyx could push through them, but its large size means more body surface area contacting the grass, increasing drag and energy costs compared to staying in open water channels. In addition, some regions contain deep, unstable peat and muck that behave like semi-liquid ground. For a multi-ton animal with relatively narrow, upright feet, this means a very high chance of it sinking or losing stable footing until it learns which routes are safest. Seasonal shifts between high water and low water also dramatically reshape the landscape. But unlike less terrestrial species like alligators, Baryonyx wouldn't be trapped in shrinking pools when the water recedes. Its size, long stride, and more terrestrial build would let it travel easily across land in search of deeper water bodies. While it prefers water, it isn't dependent on staying in a single location the way some modern semi-aquatic reptiles are. Even so, these obstacles are relatively minor when you consider the overall suitability of the Everglades. From the abundant shallow waterways to the warm humid climate and plentiful wetland terrain, almost every aspect of this ecosystem aligns perfectly with the lifestyle Baryonyx evolved for. This scores Baryonyx a habitat adaptability rating of 9 out of 10. Baryonyx was a semi-aquatic predator specialized for hunting fish and other aquatic prey. Its long crocodilian-like snout, conical teeth, and large foreclaws were perfect for grabbing slippery prey, while its body plan allowed it to wade and strike along river margins. But Baryonyx wasn't strictly limited to water. It was likely an opportunistic hunter capable of scavenging or taking small to mid-sized terrestrial animals when the chance arose. However, there's one major factor we have to consider: food availability. Baryonyx is several magnitudes larger than any other predator in the Everglades, and the introduction of such a massive predator could put a real strain on the ecosystem. A breeding population would need very large territories with adults spread out from one another to ensure each individual could consistently find enough food. Even in a prey-rich environment like the Everglades, the sheer caloric demand of multiple multi-ton predators limit how many could coexist without overtaxing the ecosystem. That said, the Everglades does provide plenty of familiar food. Fish, turtles, amphibians, wading birds, and crustaceans are abundant, and Baryonyx could hunt along water edges or shallow channels using cover to ambush prey. Terrestrial animals like wild hogs and deer could occasionally supplement its diet, but these species are fast and agile, so only dense sawgrass, mangroves, or tree islands would allow successful ambushes. As a result, terrestrial prey would be occasional supplements rather than a reliable food source. The Everglades' two top predators, the American alligator and the Burmese python, would also provide high-calorie meals. Both are abundant throughout the region, and while a large adult could pose a risk, a fully grown Baryonyx is a formidable predator and could likely overpower most individuals. The largest alligators would be risky targets because their powerful bites could inflict serious damage, but they would have little chance of killing a healthy adult Baryonyx. Its semi-aquatic lifestyle also opens up some additional opportunities along Florida's coastline. As a peninsula, the state has extensive mangrove forest, estuaries, tidal flats, and shallow nearshore waters. Here, Baryonyx could take advantage of seasonal fish runs, stingrays, and other coastal prey, tapping into food sources that most modern predators can't exploit as efficiently. Ultimately, the biggest limiting factor is food availability. Even with abundant prey and flexible feeding strategies, Baryonyx could only exist at low population densities, with each adult individual needing a large territory to meet its energy needs. Still, the Everglades offers a rich and varied menu, making it well suited to Baryonyx's dietary needs. This scores Baryonyx a dietary compatibility rating of 8 out of 10. Stepping into the Everglades, Baryonyx wouldn't be entering an empty niche. It would be joining a densely packed ecosystem full of aggressive adaptable predators, each carving out their own space along the waterways and wetlands. Its closest ecological analog is the American alligator, a dominant semi-aquatic ambush predator that controls rivers, canals, marshes, and prime basking sites. While a fully grown Baryonyx would be far larger and stronger than even the biggest adult alligators, the danger isn't entirely one-sided. A miscalculated attack could result in deep bites, broken bones, or serious infection, making encounters risky. Despite this, Baryonyx's size, strength, and sharp claws would almost always give it the upper hand, making it the apex predator in any direct confrontation. And then there's the Burmese python, an invasive giant constrictor that has single-handedly reshaped the Everglades ecosystem, drastically reducing populations of medium and large mammals and altering predator-prey dynamics. These pythons compete for much of the same semi-aquatic and terrestrial prey Baryonyx would target. Juvenile Baryonyx could be vulnerable to pythons, especially if left unprotected, but adults are virtually untouchable. Even so, pythons would indirectly affect Baryonyx by reducing prey availability. Other predators like Florida panthers, bobcats, coyotes, river otters, wading birds, and raccoons pose little direct threat to adults, but could harass juveniles, steal prey, or create competition hotspots around abundant food sources. Normally, this high level of competition would pose a big problem for a new predator, and while yes, it certainly would play a factor in Baryonyx's survival, it actually wouldn't be as big a deal as it might be for other species. Baryonyx is so much more powerful than anything else in the ecosystem that its competitors are also potential prey. Any conflict with a modern predator would almost always end with the other animal running away or being eaten. In other words, competition matters far less when your rivals can also be your dinner. The Everglades remains a densely competitive environment, filled with apex and near-apex predators all vying for the same water-rich habitats and prime feeding spots. A newly introduced Baryonyx would need to navigate these crowded hunting grounds carefully, but its size, strength, and semi-aquatic adaptations would make it the undisputed top predator once it reaches adulthood. This scores Baryonyx a competition and predation rating of 9 out of 10. While an adult Baryonyx in the Everglades is practically surviving as an adult is only part of the story. If its offspring can't survive to adulthood, then nothing else matters. Baryonyx likely laid clutches of eggs in protected nests near water, similar to modern crocodilians. But unlike alligators, there's no direct evidence that Baryonyx actively cared for its young. Instead, like many large theropods, it probably relied on producing multiple offspring and nesting in relatively safe locations, rather than engaging in extended parental care. In the Everglades, eggs would be highly vulnerable to a wide array of predators, including raccoons, possums, snakes, and large wading birds which would readily prey on nest. Once hatched, juveniles would confront an even more dangerous gauntlet. Burmese pythons, American alligators, and other opportunistic carnivores would pose serious threats, making early survival a critical bottleneck. Seasonal flooding, drought cycles, and fluctuating water levels could further displace nests or force juveniles to move frequently, adding environmental stress to the predation pressures. Without parental protection, even minor missteps could be fatal. That said, there are some positive factors in Baryonyx's favor. The Everglades has plenty of elevated tree islands, hummocks, and vegetated banks suitable for nesting, giving adults opportunities to place clutches in relatively safe locations. Furthermore, like most theropods, Baryonyx likely grew quickly in its early years. Rapid juvenile growth would reduce the amount of time they spend at the most vulnerable sizes, increasing the chances that some hatchlings survive to adulthood. Once adults, Baryonyx becomes largely invulnerable to predation, able to establish territories with consistent access to prey and successfully reproduce. Taken together, while the Everglades provide suitable nesting locations and a supportive environment for rapid growth, high predation on eggs and juveniles, minimal parental care, and environmental fluctuations make reproduction a significant challenge. Baryonyx could establish a population, but it would likely be small, slow-growing, and limited by juvenile survival. This scores Baryonyx a reproductive success rating of 6 out of 10. This scores the Baryonyx a Survive Adapt Evolve score of 8 out of 10. Its semi-aquatic adaptations, powerful build, and flexible diet make it extremely well suited to the Everglades' warm, watery environment, allowing it to thrive as a top predator. The main challenge comes from reproduction. Eggs and juveniles would face heavy predation and environmental pressures, meaning population growth would be limited and long-term persistence depends on a small fraction of hatchlings surviving to adulthood. Overall, the Everglades could support Baryonyx, and as adults, these dinosaurs would have a dominant presence in the ecosystem. Success would rely on a combination of adaptability, territory management, and the natural advantages of being a large semi-aquatic predator. Before we dive into the speculative evolutions, I want to give a huge shout out to the incredible artist Delta Reaper 54. Most of the creature art you see on this channel, including the amazing speculative evolutions you're about to see, were created by him. If you enjoy his work, be sure to check out more of his art. His info is linked in the description below. For a semi-aquatic predator like Baryonyx, the modern Everglades presents an unusual blend of opportunity and danger. The wetlands are overflowing with prey, but also with competition. Alligators, crocodiles, invasive Burmese pythons, and countless smaller predators that crowd every corner of the marsh. Over generations, this constant pressure shapes any species that lives here. For Baryonyx, one challenge stands above the rest: the explosion of Burmese pythons. Pythons dominate huge stretches of the Everglades, consuming mammals, birds, reptiles, and even alligators. Any Baryonyx lineage living alongside them would either have to shift its niche or be pushed aside entirely. The individuals that could reliably kill and consume these massive constrictors would gain access to a near-limitless high-calorie food source. Over time, natural selection would favor speed, precision strikes, and specialized anti-python weaponry. What emerged is a sleek, deadly wader perfectly adapted to the serpent-choked wetlands. Locals call it the reed stalker, but scientifically, it's known as Baryonyx pythonophagus, the python-eating Baryonyx. This animal stretches roughly 6 meters from snout to tail, yet it weighs only around 1.2 to 1.4 tons, making it lean for a theropod of its size. Its entire body plan reflects its environment. Long legs lift its torso well above the waterline, giving it a tall, heron-like posture that allows it to move silently through flooded marshes, sawgrass flats, shallow rivers, and natural water choke points. Its tail is narrow and counterbalanced, helping the animal stay perfectly aligned as it lunges. Subtle proto-feathers trace along its arms and neck, acting as display functions during the breeding season. Its skull is one of its most distinctive features, a long, narrow, gharial-like snout lined with fine recurved teeth, ideal for gripping serpents. This precision tool is backed by a reinforced neck and shoulder musculature, allowing the reed stalker to snap its jaws sideways to snag a slick python from the water. Its forelimbs remain armed with wickedly hooked claws, and though they are smaller than the original, they are still lethal, used to pin thrashing prey or rake at a python's soft body. Though Burmese pythons and other snakes make up a significant portion of its diet, it remains opportunistic, taking fish, turtles, eggs, and other prey whenever available. The behavior of the reed stalker is defined by its patience and precision, often standing motionless for hours at a time before exploding into motion with a lateral neck snap or a sudden forward lunge. Smaller prey is dispatched immediately, while larger pythons may be pinned beneath its weight as the reed stalker finishes them with its claws. In addition to this, it frequently targets python nests and hatchlings when available, turning the tide against the invasive species in a way no native predator has managed. Mostly solitary, it roams vast territories, coming together only briefly during the mating season before parting ways again. Elegant, deadly, and perfectly molded by its environment, the reed stalker's impact in the modern Everglades is impossible to ignore. By relentlessly hunting adult pythons, raiding nests, and targeting the young before they can disperse, this species has single-handedly pushed the invasive population into a steady decline. While some baryonyx in the Everglades adapted for speed and precision in the python-infested wetlands, others faced a very different challenge deeper in the swamp's interior. In the dense cypress groves, visibility is poor, movement is restricted, and almost every hunt becomes a close-quarters brawl. Massive alligators lurk beneath duckweed pools, armored turtles cram onto logs, and feral hogs erupt from the mud in violent bursts. In this cramped, chaotic world, survival favors raw strength, crushing power, and the ability to grapple prey. Over generations, individuals with more compact builds, stronger forelimbs, and more flexible wrists outperform their sleeker relatives, giving rise to a lineage built for ambush and brute force. Locals call this fearsome predator the marsh ripper. Scientifically, it's known as Baryonyx onychiruptor, the rupturing claw Baryonyx. This animal measures around 6 meters long, but its mass at roughly 1.6 tons is packed into a compact muscular frame. Its entire body is low slung and built for stealth in thick vegetation. The torso is robust, with dense musculature concentrated in the shoulders and upper limbs, allowing the marsh ripper to explode forward with startling force. Though capable of bipedal lunges when attacking, it often travels on all fours, using a specialized form of knuckle walking, similar to how megatheriums did. This posture keeps its enormous claws elevated and razor sharp. These claws are its defining weapons, massive recurved hooks powered by dense forearm musculature and supported by highly flexible wrists. With them, the marsh ripper can latch onto armored turtle shells, grip the ridged scales of an alligator, or tear through the hide of a charging feral hog. Its skull is broad and reinforced, built for crushing pressure rather than precision snatching, allowing it to crack shells or overpower crocodilians with brutal efficiency. Its legs remain digitrade, with partially webbed toes that provide stability on slick mud, submerged roots, and rotting vegetation. A subtle ridge of raised scales along its spine serves as a display crest during territorial standoffs or courtship rituals, barely visible until the animal intentionally bristles it. Behaviorally, the marsh ripper is a master of ambush. It can lie motionless for hours beneath low vegetation or in shallow water, relying on patience and camouflage until prey wanders within striking distance. When it moves, it does so with explosive violence, surging forward, claws outstretched, grappling and pinning its target in a sudden, overwhelming burst of force. Turtles are crushed, hogs are dragged thrashing into the water, and alligators are dispatched in fierce, churning struggles. Its vocalizations are low-frequency rumbles that travel through water and dense vegetation, perfect for marking territory without alerting potential prey. Solitary by nature, marsh rippers meet only briefly during the breeding season, guarding nests on elevated hummocks or sheltered root tangles before separating again. In the darkest reaches of the Everglades, the marsh ripper acts as a keystone predator. It curbs the spread of destructive feral hogs and reduces the dominance of alligators in wetlands. Where the reed stalker restored order to python-choked marshes, the marsh ripper reshaped the deep swamp, maintaining a harsh but essential equilibrium in one of North America's most tangled and unforgiving ecosystems. Along the fringes of the Everglades, where mangroves give way to warm estuaries and shallow seagrass beds, Baryonyx faced a very different challenge from its swamp-dwelling relatives. Here the water is calm and rich with life, but most of that life is small and hidden beneath sediment. Scattered throughout these habitats are manatees, typically feeding alone or in loose temporary gatherings wherever seagrass is plentiful. Their constant grazing stirs up the seafloor, flushing out clams, crustaceans, and small fish. For a semi-aquatic predator, the smarter strategy wasn't brute force. It was cooperation. Over generations, baryonyx that lingered near feeding manatees gained steady access to disturbed prey, while also unintentionally discouraging predators from approaching mothers and calves. Individuals with calmer dispositions, better swimming control, and a tolerance for the slow-moving mammals thrived. What began as opportunism evolved into a specialized low-conflict relationship. Manatees learned not to fear this reptilian shadow, and the lineage came to rely on these scattered feeding groups for nourishment. Locals now call this peaceful, ever-present companion the lagoon sentinel. Scientifically, it is known as Baryonyx manateephylax, the manatee guardian Baryonyx. Smaller than its ancestors, the lagoon sentinel reaches about 4.5 meters long and weighs 650 to 700 kilograms. Its compact muscular torso and paddle-like tail make it a controlled, powerful swimmer, able to glide beside grazing manatees without disturbing them. Primarily quadrupedal, it can rear into a tripod stance, balancing on its hind limbs and tail to survey the water or perform defensive displays. In addition, a low dorsal sail aids in thermal regulation and swimming. Its skull has shifted dramatically from typical Baryonyx proportions. The snout is now short and blunt, fitted with small conical teeth ideal for grasping small prey. Specialized salt glands allow long-term survival in brackish lagoons. Robust forelimbs with curved claws help the sentinel dig through sediment or fend off attackers, while sensory pads along the snout and feet detect vibrations from prey stirred up by manatee feeding. But it's the lagoon sentinel's behavior that truly defines it. Calm and non-aggressive towards manatees, it moves alongside their loose aggregations like a quiet guardian. Manatees, normally cautious, have learned its silhouette and show no distress around it. In return for the steady supply of prey kicked up during grazing, the sentinel often positions itself between manatee calves and potential threats. When would-be predators appear, like bold crocodiles, prowling sharks, or even other Baryonyx descendants, the sentinel rises into a tripod stance, emits a deep rumbling warning call, and sweeps its forelimbs through the water in wide intimidating arcs. These displays usually deter all but the most determined attackers. Although generally solitary, it tolerates other sentinels near the same feeding groups, especially in rich seagrass areas or when calves are present. In the coastal Everglades, the lagoon sentinel has become a quiet but influential stabilizing force. By discouraging predators and reducing pressure on vulnerable calves, it indirectly supports healthier manatee recruitment across several lagoon systems. Through this unusual ecological partnership, Baryonyx manatee phylax has transformed from a Cretaceous river predator into a serene guardian of one of Florida's gentlest species. An extraordinary evolutionary path shaped not by dominance, but by coexistence. Thanks for watching this episode of Survive, Adapt, Evolve. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any future content. And be sure to let me know down below which of these speculative evolutions was your favorite, and which one you think would be the most likely to evolve in the Everglades. And a special shout out to channel members. Thank you so much for your support. Until next time, stay curious, and I'll see you all in the next video.